Welcome to Noisy Mind Podcast. Today we're diving into something pretty significant, the start of Pope Leo XIV's pontificate. He's the first American pope, which is historic in itself, but he's also stepping in at, well, a really complex time. We've gathered insights from quite a few reports to try and map out the biggest challenges he's facing right from the get-go. Think of this as your guide to understanding what's on the new pope's plate.
It's definitely a critical moment. And the sources we looked at, they really paint a picture of a church facing some, let's say, urgent crises. That phrase comes up a bit. These aren't minor bumps. They're described as being rooted in the current cultural and even civilizational landscape.
Okay, urgent crises. That sounds intense. What are we talking about specifically?
Well, the reports suggest the cardinals themselves felt this urgency. Their selection process, how they went about choosing the new leader, seems to reflect a need for both, careful thought and decisive action.
Right. So what's the first big hurdle the reports highlight?
One major theme, almost unavoidable in the analysis, is the need for serious reform in the church's own justice system.
Ah, okay. Is this linked to specific cases?
Yes, the name that comes up repeatedly as a sort of a case study, unfortunately, is Fr. Marco Repnik. It's highlighted as a really stark example of the church struggling, frankly, to deliver justice effectively and, crucially, to maintain public trust in its internal processes.
That makes sense. Trust is so fragile when it comes to things like this.
Exactly. And it's not just about doing justice, though that's obviously paramount. It's also about being seen to do justice. One source actually quoted that old legal saying, justice must not only be done, but be seen to be done.
Yeah, that perception piece is huge. If people think things are being swept under the rug.
Precisely. And there have been criticisms, historically, about inconsistencies, sometimes seeming very merciful, other times maybe not applying justice evenly. So for Pope Leo XIV, fixing this, starting right there within the Vatican, is seen as absolutely critical. It needs to be effective, yes, but also transparent. It has to set the standard for the whole church and maybe even for the world looking on.
It sounds like a foundational issue. If the internal justice system isn't trusted, it probably affects everything else.
It really does. And, this isn't actually a brand new problem. We found a reference, quite an old one actually, from the 19th century, Edmund About, pointing out similar consistencies back then.
Wow, so it's a long-standing challenge. What makes it so acute now for Pope Leo XIV then? Is it just the spotlight is brighter?
I think that's a huge part of it. The historical context shows it's deep-rooted, yes. But today, with instant global communication, social media, everything is magnified. Missteps, or even just the appearance of missteps, can erode trust incredibly quickly. So the pressure is immense. Yeah. He doesn't just need to reform the system. He needs to convince a very skeptical, very connected global audience that the reform is real and meaningful.
Okay, so justice system reform, massive task. What else is demanding immediate attention?
Well, closely linked, according to some analyses, is the financial situation. The Vatican is apparently facing a pretty serious financial crisis.
Right, I saw mentions of that. Budget deficits increasing significantly.
Yes, reports indicate the deficit actually tripled under the previous papacy, and there's a major worry about the pension fund.
A pension fund? How bad is that?
The figures vary a bit depending on the source and when the audit was done. One older estimate mentioned a shortfall potentially around $1.5 billion. A more recent one put it closer to $631 million. Either way, it's a substantial liability, a huge hole.
Wow, that's a lot of money. What's driving this? Just mismanagement.
It seems to be a mix of factors. The reports mention the impact of COVID-19, certainly adding to existing pressures, but also long-standing issues with bureaucracy and maybe inefficiencies. Plus, it sounds like some previous attempts at financial reform haven't been fully completed or implemented, and there's still talk of, infighting between different Vatican departments. It complicates things.
So unfinished business and internal disagreements on top of a deficit sounds like a tough knot to untangle.
Very tough. Pope Leo XIV will likely need to push for much greater transparency and maybe even rethink how the Holy See manages its assets entirely. We're talking real estate holdings, investments, a complex portfolio.
And isn't the Vatican quite reliant on donations too, like Peter's Pence?
Absolutely. That's a key point raised in the sources. A significant portion of the operating expenses are covered by external donations, which loops right back to trust, doesn't it? If people lose faith in how the money is being handled,
they might stop giving.
Yeah, that could have a direct impact on the church's day-to-day work.
Precisely. And this theme of division and trust, it extends beyond just finances. Another major challenge identified is the polarization within the church itself.
Ah, the progressive versus traditionalist split.
Exactly. That divide seems to have become much more pronounced, or at least more visible, during the last pontificate, according to several observers. Issues like inclusion, a whole concept of synodality.
Which is that idea of more consultation and listening across the church, right?
Broadly speaking, yes. That and also things like the approach to the traditional Latin Mass, these have become real flashpoints for tension. We even saw reports mentioning anonymous letters, apparently from conservative cardinals, voicing concerns about the church's direction.
So Pope Leo XIV inherits a church that seems quite fractured internally. How does he even begin to bridge that? That is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? It'll require, I think, immense diplomatic skill, understanding the different viewpoints, trying to find common ground, or at least fostering a climate where disagreement doesn't automatically mean hostility. And as one analyst pointed out, social media kind of throws fuel on the fire sometimes.
Yeah, it allows different narratives to spread very quickly, challenging the official line, perhaps.
Exactly. It makes managing unity or even just dialogue much more complex than it used to be.
Okay, so we've got justice reform, financial crisis, internal polarization. What's next on this challenging list?
The role of women in the church. This remains a key and often sensitive area.
How so? Weren't there
Right.
some steps taken recently to give women more prominent roles?
There were, yes. The previous pope did appoint women to some significant positions within the Vatican Curia.
Yeah.
But the question now facing Pope Leo XIV is what happens next? Does he continue that trajectory, accelerate it, or maybe change course?
And what are the underlying issues driving this?
Well, many sources indicate a feeling among a lot of Catholic women that despite their massive contributions, think about education, healthcare, running parishes day to day, they still hold a kind of second-class status institutionally. And then, of course, there's the ongoing, very charged discussion about women's ordination. That remains a major point of contention and hope for some, and a firm no for others based on tradition.
So another area requiring careful navigation between tradition and calls for change.
Absolutely. He'll need to figure out how to best acknowledge and utilize the talents of women without, triggering deeper divisions or going against established doctrine in ways that cause backlash.
It sounds like almost every issue has these deep divisions attached to it.
Seems that way, yes.
Yeah.
Which makes the task of leadership incredibly complex.
And we can't discuss challenges without mentioning the clergy sexual abuse crisis. Where do things stand there, according to the reports? Is it seen as being handled now?
There's an acknowledgement that some progress has been made. Policies have been put in place, like zero tolerance in many areas. But, and this is a strong but, from survivors and advocates, there's a very clear call for Pope Leo XIV to make this an absolute top priority. Not just a priority, but the priority.
What specifically are they asking for?
Continued and even stronger action. They want unwavering commitment to zero tolerance everywhere, universally applied. And crucially, greater accountability for bishops or other leaders who mishandled cases in the past or failed to protect people.
Is there still a sense that accountability hasn't been consistent?
That's certainly the feeling expressed in some reports.
Yeah.
One point that came up is a perceived inconsistency. Like, the church might seem very rigorous about, say, who can or cannot be ordained, but perhaps less consistently rigorous when it comes to accountability for abuse cover-ups. Whether that perception is entirely fair or not, it exists, and it's damaging. Rebuilding trust requires demonstrating that protecting the vulnerable is the absolute highest value in practice.
Another deeply sensitive area requiring immense focus. Okay, what about the church's relationship with the LGBTQ plus community? That's been quite prominent in discussions, too.
Yes, definitely. This presents another significant challenge. The previous pope made gestures towards more openness, perhaps most notably allowing priests to offer blessings for same-sex couples under certain conditions.
Right, fiducia supplicans, that caused quite a stir, didn't it?
It really did. While welcomed by some, it faced considerable pushback, especially as reports highlighted from bishops in Africa and other parts of the world. It really underscored the vast diversity within the global church and how different cultures approach these issues.
So Pope Leo IV then inherits this tension as well. How does he navigate that? Trying to be welcoming while also maintaining unity seems like walking a tightrope.
It absolutely is. He'll need to find a way, or try to find a way, for LGBTQ plus Catholics to feel genuinely part of the church community, while simultaneously managing the strong theological and cultural differences that exist across the globe on this topic. The recent synodal process itself showed just how wide the range of views is.
It really highlights the global nature of the church, doesn't it? Which brings us to another point, the shifting demographics.
Exactly. The reports emphasize the huge growth of Catholicism in the global South Africa, Asia, Latin America. This is increasingly where the church's energy and numbers are.
So what does that mean for an American Pope, Leo XIV?
Well, there's likely an expectation that he'll continue the trends set by his predecessors of broadening representation, appointing more cardinals, more bishops from these growing regions. It's about ensuring the church's leadership truly reflects its global reality. But it's more than just appointments.
How so?
It's about understanding and genuinely engaging with the very different concerns and context of Catholics worldwide. The challenges faced by a Catholic community in, say, parts of Africa dealing with poverty or conflict might be vastly different from those in Europe or North America focused on secularization. He needs to be a pope for all those realities.
That requires a truly global perspective. And tied to that, I suppose, is the broader challenge of just keeping pace with modernity, engaging with contemporary society.
Yes, that's a constant underlying challenge. How does an ancient institution adapt to rapid social change? Technological shifts, especially with younger generations, embracing technology, social media, finding ways to communicate effectively, but also addressing modern ethical questions, social issues that sometimes clash with traditional teachings.
And doing that in a way that resonates across all those diverse cultures we just talked about.
Precisely. Providing guidance that feels relevant, whether you're in Manila or Munich or Michigan, it's a huge balancing act.
We've covered some massive institutional challenges. Did the reports mention anything more granular? Issues bubbling up from the local level?
Yes, actually. A couple of interesting points emerged regarding local parish life. One was about financial transparency, but at the parish level this time.
Not just the Vatican Bank, but the collection plate.
Kind of, yeah. Concerns were reported from some communities about a lack of clarity on how local church funds are collected and spent. There were even mentions, perhaps anecdotal but still indicative of a sentiment, about priests maybe using church resources for personal benefit, or instances where small donations were allegedly rejected.
Oh, wow. That kind of thing could really breed distrust at the grassroots level, couldn't it?
Absolutely. It directly impacts people's willingness to participate and support their local church. So Pope Leo XIV might need to encourage or even mandate greater transparency and accountability right down to the parish finances.
What else came up from the local perspective?
The issue of priest allocation. Basically, some regions have severe shortages of priests, while others might be relatively well-staffed. This leads to real practical difficulties, communities not having regular Mass, sacraments being hard to access.
So, a logistical challenge on top of everything else. How might the Pope address that?
It likely requires some strategic thinking about resource allocation, maybe new models for ministry, perhaps empowering lay people more in certain roles where priests are scarce. It's about ensuring consistent pastoral care everywhere.
That connects to another point, doesn't it? The role of lay people more generally.
It does. The final challenge highlighted in several reports was a call from some quarters for greater freedom of expression within the church and for more meaningful involvement of lay people in actual decision-making.
Not just consultation, but actual influence.
Exactly. The feeling reported is that sometimes the structure feels very top-down, very hierarchical, which can lead to frustration or a sense that lay expertise and perspectives aren't fully valued or utilized. There seems to be a desire for a more collaborative model, where lay people feel like genuine partners in shaping the church's mission and future.
So it seems Pope Leo XIV isn't just inheriting problems, but also calls for significant shifts in how the church operates top to bottom.
That's a good way to put it. It's a daunting list, really.
It really is. So as you can hear, Pope Leo XIV steps into this role with, well, a packed agenda doesn't quite cover it, does it? These challenges you've talked about, justice reform, financial stability, the internal polarization, the role of women, the abuse crisis, LGBTQ plus inclusion, the shift to the global south, adapting to modernity, local financial transparency, priest shortages, lay involvement. It's huge. These issues are undoubtedly going to shape his pontificate right from the start.
No question about it. Each one is complex on its own, and they're all interconnected in many ways.
We hope this discussion has given you a clearer picture of the landscape the new pope is navigating. Of course, there's so much more depth to each of these areas. We really encourage you, if you're interested, to look deeper into the reports and the ongoing discussions about this critical time for the Catholic Church. And if you found this overview insightful, please do consider subscribing to Noisy Mind channel for more discussions like this. Give this one a like if you found it helpful, and maybe share it with others who might be curious about these issues. Before we wrap up, maybe a final thought to leave people with. Considering everything we've discussed, all these massive challenges, what do you think is the one thing, the single most pressing issue Pope Leo XIV absolutely has to tackle effectively in his first year or so to really set a positive tone and build some momentum. It's a tough question, but something to really ponder as his pontificate gets underway.